I returned from that trip sort of humbled by the process. I think until you take a tour of a grain to glass distillery, you don't really understand what really goes into it, no matter what the scale is, just right. The start to finish process. And so, I came back, and again, being 21 years old, I wasn't quite ready to make that leap. So I kept making cheese for a few more years, but really the entire time was sort of thinking about this project. And so, I got off that phone call and woke up the next morning and started writing a business plan.
Welcome to USA Booming, where business gets personal as we tell the unique stories of the successful American entrepreneur. Here's your hosts, Ryan Culpepper and Sam Pennell. Welcome back to USA Booming. We're excited. As you can see, we're in a really cool location this time. I tell you, man, it's been dang, man, we've been everywhere here recently. But
that sounds like a Johnny Cash song to me.
It might be. Is that where it came from?
I've been everywhere, man.
Yeah. Well, it's really cool. So we're here at Oak Grist with William Goldberg, and we're going to introduce you real quick. But what'd you think of the cocktail? They have cocktails here, nice little tasting room. I mean, what did?
It was a humdinger.
It was a humdinger.
That's a good thing.
It was delicious.
This is quite the venue. You're in a beautiful area, not just the state, but the country. Mm-hmm. And you come up on a beautiful Friday like this. It's pretty hard to beat what you're doing here, man.
It's awesome. So say hello to the world, William.
Hello, world.
All right.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure to be here with you guys today.
Awesome.
So yeah, we are here, Oak Grist. It's a distillery, right?
Indeed. Yeah, we are Western North Carolina's only 100% grain to glass distillery. So every drop of spirit that makes it into our bottles is brewed, fermented, distilled, and when appropriate, aged right here in this facility. We don't source any aspect of our production, no grain neutral spirits, no finished whiskey. We really take an agricultural approach to what we're doing.
Really cool. And Ryan and I, forgive us, we were joking on the way over here. There's been a lot of hooch made in these hills, but maybe this is the first time legally.
I know we were like, what, did you got sick of running from the police so you became legitimate? Or?
The revenue, right.
And real quick, I'm going to be remiss if we don't talk about this. We're definitely going to get to the genesis of this whole project and how it came about. But what did you pour us right here?
So what we've got here right in front of us is our flagship spirit, if you will. It's what we set out to create. It's a Scottish style single malt whiskey. We can't call it Scotch because it's not from Scotland, but for all intents and purposes, you could associate this with a Scotch style whiskey. It's going to be more of a Speyside Scotch style whiskey, so a little bit lighter, a little bit grassier. But this is what we set out to create. It's a minimum of 3 years old. That's the minimum in Scotland, and so my stubbornness and high standards sort of kept us from calling it a single malt until it hit at least the 3-year mark.
Okay. That's the benchmark. I know nothing about it.
Yeah. There's a whole slew of type, class, and designation when it comes to spirits. And the US actually doesn't have an official definition for single malt produced in the United States. So because of that, I chose to go with the Scottish definition when it came to our single malt.
I like it.
So yeah, made it easier for me to understand, and for other folks to understand what it actually is, as opposed to just, cool, it's whiskey, but what does that mean? Right. Because there's a lot of different types of whiskey out there.
Well, let's taste it. And
cheers.
Cheers to you.
Hit me up, buddy.
Yeah, buddy.
All right.
Wow.
It's so good.
That goes down so smoothly.
Well, thank you.
And it does taste like Scotch, right? I mean, I guess the only difference is that it's not in Scotland.
Yeah, 100%.
You don't have to wear a kilt.
Well, you can if you want.
I'll be back in a minute. I'm going to go get my kilt real quick.
No, one moment, please.
But no, that's delicious. So you said this was the flagship and kind of really what got this going, right? So it sounded like we were about to get into it a little bit, but right. Give us an idea, really. How did this all come about? A little bit about who you are and how this, because this is very impressive, by the way. I mean, this is a real deal thing. So if you will,
that's not a Zoom screen behind.
Yeah, no, this is not all plugged in. This is the real deal. So let us know how this started. I mean, I will tell you, if I ever won the lottery, I was telling Sam, I would want to start a distillery. Like,
yeah, it'd probably be a pretty good way to lose all of that money. Right. You'd certainly have fun along the way. That's for sure.
Very cool. So yeah, how did a little bit about your background and how did it all happen?
Yeah. So, going way back, I've always been interested in how things are made, making things from scratch. So, growing up, baking with my mom, putting things together with my dad. I come from somewhat of an entrepreneurial family. My grandfather started a construction company, and which my dad runs.
Cool.
My brother-in-law is part of that company. But that wasn't really right for me. I went to college down here in Western North Carolina, a small liberal arts college called Warren Wilson. They'll actually be out here this afternoon. They've got a little event going on out here.
Fun.
But majored in sustainable agriculture. And in doing that, needed to do an internship and found my way sort of unintentionally into the value added side of agriculture. So I wasn't necessarily looking to like go grow, lettuce or squash or raise beef or pork. Right. But I was incredibly interested in taking those sort of raw ingredients and being able to turn it into something else, which ultimately led me to a few creameries here in the area making cheese, some mom and pop shops, which are still around and thriving.
It's really neat because you don't hear that every day, right? That I worked for a mom and pop cheese shop.
Yeah. At least in Wall Street and in Charlotte. So that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's like, right. I mean, my background is in finance. I knew I'd probably, work for a bank of some sort or what have you. Right. So when you major in sustainable agriculture, which that's new to me, is that what you're setting out to do, to go, improve processes of cheese or, make a distillery? Or, is it something along those lines that you're intended for anyway?
So the idea behind sustainable agriculture is to approach agriculture with sort of more of a long-term, like back to the land, if you will, mentality. So you're not relying heavily on commercial fertilizers and, heavy inputs to return nutrients to the soil. You're farming in a way that regenerates the soil, and allows crops to work together. It really boils down to going back to the old ways of doing agriculture before we had GPS guided tractors and, so like monocrop and, all of that.
Well, and we're learning a lot about, and I would take it that's probably because some of the same plants, if you kept doing corn,
crop rotation and things like that.
You're going to take the same.
You're going to deplete the soil,
right? Yeah.
And then you're going to have to add something back to that soil to grow corn on that same plot of land again the next year. So, it's all about, how can you rotate your crops to, replenish nutrients without having to add too much commercial fertilizer. So, again, it truly boils down into like a more natural way of doing things, a more organic way of doing things, without all the connotations necessarily that and restrictions that come with organic, but truly farming for the land rather than, the other way around and just, pulling from the land and never giving back.
And you got into cheese through that way. And
yeah, so basically, cows graze grass and produce milk, and that milk can be turned into cheese. And it's actually, it's not entirely the same as brewing, but a lot of the processes are really the same. You're taking a raw ingredient, you're heating it up, you're adding a culture or a yeast to it. That yeast or culture is going to do its thing. And then, with cheese, it's either a fresh product or you're putting it into a cave and you're aging it. So, you think of cheddar, sometimes those cheddars are, 3 years old, 5 years old.
Right.
So, a lot of those same principles we're doing here in the distillery, it's just a different raw ingredient and a different end product.
Right. So, you have whiskeys, you have gin. One is kind of that, as soon as it's out of the hopper, it's ready to roll. The other takes time. Talk about the patience as an entrepreneur to wait on a good product and still keep the lights on.
Yeah.
You need to have a lot of it. I'll start there. I mean, I think I was somewhat ahead of the game, actually transitioning from cheese making into distilling. I'm fortunate enough to have a mentor. His name is Edwin Dodson. He's a retired master distiller from Scotland. And so, from the very first day that I started writing this business plan, I understood that when it came to whiskey, what I distilled today isn't going to be ready for, if it comes to our single malt, for a minimum of 3 years. And, my ultimate goal is to have a 10+ single malt.
Okay.
So, it's a lesson that I'm relearning every single day, that patience, and that hurry up and wait mentality. But in my opinion, there's ways that you can quote unquote speed up the maturation process. You can use oak spirals, and you can do all these sorts of things that allow you to get a more mature tasting spirit in a shorter amount of time. But you're also going to compromise on things. You're going to miss out. There's no replacement for time when it comes to maturation. Not to say that you can't have a really good product with a rapid aging technique, but it just is going to be different. And so, yeah, I mean, on the patient side of things, it's just, put as much product down as you possibly can. And, as long as it tastes good coming out of the still, you can be pretty sure that it's going to taste good coming out of the barrel, but it's not a guarantee. So there's definitely some, anxiousness surrounding that. But in between me putting down our first barrel of whiskey and where we are today, I also went into this knowing that I would need to have something else. I would need to have something else that wasn't going to require 3+ years of aging. And that's where our gins come into play.
Yeah. So real quick, I mean, why gin over vodka, right? There isn't an aging process there, or is there?
There can be with gin. Typically vodka isn't aged, although I am aware of one distillery that is at least playing around with aging some vodka.
Okay.
But for me, the reason why no vodka is because by definition, federal definition of vodka, it is a tasteless, odorless spirit. And so when you look at vodka's principal job is to just be alcohol.
Yeah.
And to get you a buzz and to do that. And now I would be, I would not be doing vodka, or I would be doing vodka a disservice if I didn't acknowledge the fact that there is flavor in vodka, depending on what you make the vodka from. But in the process of distilling vodka, you're stripping a lot of the flavor out. To create such a high proof alcohol, because vodka has to be distilled to 180 proof or 90% alcohol to be considered vodka. And so that process of creating something that in a perfect world doesn't actually taste like anything,
alcohol, it's just,
really didn't appeal to me. And the a lot of vodka that's being sold in this country is actually what the industry calls grain neutral spirits. And that's oftentimes being purchased from a much larger distillery that's just producing, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of gallons of vodka a year. And that is also serving as the base for the majority of the gin in the world. Most people are buying that same base to turn into gin. They're infusing botanicals into it, and either through steeping it like a tea with the botanicals, or vapor infusion. And then it comes off of the still flavored as gin. But what we do differently here is we make a Geneva Style Gin, which is the original Dutch version of gin, invented back, I believe, in the late 1500s.
Super cool.
And it's a malt based gin. So it is a whiskey based gin. And so inherently it has a bit of a whiskey background flavor to it. And it also has a dialed back juniper profile. So it's not going to be as piney or Christmas tree like as your typical London dry style gin, your Bombay, your Tanqueray, things like that. It's going to have more of a backbone to it. It's going to have more of that underlying spirit and grain profile coming through. And so when I found that style of gin, it really made sense to me as a hopefully single malt distillery primarily to make a quote unquote, I can't actually officially call it a single malt gin, but to make a single malt gin, which is technically what our gin is, we make our single malt whiskey and then we infuse our botanicals into that whiskey. It just seemed like such a good fit, and as well as a way to help bridge that gap between production and release of a whiskey. So we were able to have a product between those two things.
So you're taking your background of process improvement and sustainability, and you're creating two distinct outcomes with something that's aged in more like a single malt whiskey. And then you get this more, I don't want to call it instant. That's not the right word, but with the gin. So that's really cool that you're able to take your background and actually apply it. How often do we hear, I never used my college education and I went and did this, and this is where my passion was.
Yeah. So then that leads me to wonder, you had this discussion with your mentor. I mean, you were making cheeses, these types of things. I mean, how did that conversation come to be to, where he's like, dude, I trust you enough to, it sounds like he even has some type of backing financially or those types of things. I mean, raising money, how did it all get going from the conversation to the business plan, or, were you unhappy making cheese, or how did it happen?
No, I was very happy making cheese. I mean, I was eating big blocks of brie for lunch. It was glorious. It really, the initial concept was born. I graduated from college and I took a trip to Scotland and stayed with my mentor.
Okay. And
the idea behind that trip was that I would come back and I would start a distillery. I was 21 years old, lots of ambition, but I returned from that trip sort of humbled by the process. I think until you take a tour of a grain to glass distillery, you don't really understand what really goes into it, no matter what the scale is, just right. The start to finish process. And so, I came back, and again, being 21 years old, I wasn't quite ready to make that leap. So I kept making cheese for a few more years, but really the entire time was sort of thinking about this project. I'd been finding its way into my mind more and more. About 4 years into the working at Looking Glass Creamery, and I just sort of looked inward and was like, I can either take this chance and do this now. I'm young. If I want to get to a 20-year-old single malt, I will. You gotta go. I will theoretically still be around.
That's right.
For it. And so I called up the son of my mentor, who's a good family friend, and asked him if he and his dad might be interested in participating in this. The son has an engineering background, so very much came into play with sort of the design of the infrastructure for the distillery.
Sure.
And then of course, my mentor and they didn't hesitate. They said, absolutely. I don't know whether some of that was like the son, having the chance to be a distiller once upon a time and choosing to go a different route and, sort of now being able to return back to and participate in a distillery. I'm
sure, yeah.
Like his father did, because he literally grew up on the grounds of a distillery.
Wow.
Their house was on the distillery grounds. And so, I think for him, it was sort of in a weird way, even though he's not actually here, on the day to day, it very much was a return to his roots.
To his roots, absolutely.
And so, I got off that phone call and woke up the next morning and started writing the business plan.
And that's great. They knew what was going into it. They knew that at a minimum, it's 3 years before we can start pumping out this flagship type product. Mm-hmm. Right. So, that's awesome. So now you come, I mean, was this the first building? Is this kind of what you guys started with and built it out? And
yeah, we spent about 6 months looking for the right building.
And did you want to be in Western North Carolina in that search, or was it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, okay. I moved down here from the Northeast to go to college and fell in love with this area. The mountains, the rivers, everything, you know.
Absolutely.
Right? You know, and it's you know, if you look around, Sierra Nevada, New Belgium Brewing, and Oscar Blues all built a second facility here because we have some of the best water for brewing in the country.
Okay.
It's very neutral. And so you can, if your original facility is on the West Coast and you have a different hardness of water, you can adjust this water a whole lot easier than like if you were somewhere else that was, you know, the opposite end of the spectrum. But yeah, knew I wanted to be in Western North Carolina, knew one that I would need a sizable production space, but also knew that if this distillery is successful, I'm going to need even larger maturation space. Cause at a certain point, what you have in barrels outweighs what you have in equipment.
Right.
So you're
trying to get that maturity
and so you're constantly putting barrels away and you need space to store that barrels. And so, you know, we were looking at buildings in downtown Asheville and West Asheville and, you know, all these sort of hip neighborhoods. And one, we were looking at making a massive investment into a facility. And we couldn't find any landlords or building owners to sort of help us out with that. You know, if we're going to put $300,000 into your building, we're going to need something in return. You know, we're making a lot of improvements to your building and you can't charge us $18 a square foot, which is what people want to charge us, you know, what we're going to put 5 years ago with what we're going to put in. We just can't float.
No, and I would imagine the real estate now is even way more crazy.
Oh yeah. I can't imagine.
Thank God you got in 5 years ago.
Yeah. I can't imagine trying to, find a good location. Although on the other hand, you know, all the folks who have just sort of been able to hold on to things until now, I'm sure there's a lot of great real estate out there. It's just really expensive now.
Right.
But yeah, so we found this building. It's a 5,000 square foot enclosed building. We are currently in 3,200 square feet. We're hoping to expand into the other 1,800 square feet in the next few months for barrel maturation. But the amazing thing about this building is that it's got a lot of potential for expansion. You know, we can double the size of this building with just a lot of concrete, but some walls. I mean, we've got awnings around the entire building. It's a very easily expandable building. So plus it's in Black Mountain, which is, you know, I went to school here. I spent 4 years of my life in this town and it just holds a
special place,
special place in my heart.
I was telling Sam, I worked down the road actually. And still every time I drive through and I see the exit, it's like, man, I used to pull right off there. The 4th of July's in Black Mountain are a lot of fun. So, so then as you're talking about this 3-year process and large investment in these types of things, something that immediately comes to my mind, right? This is a business, economics, finance type podcast. Sure. Pricing pressures, those types of things. You can't go anywhere without hearing about inflation or what have you. Is that eaten into your product or your pricing and things, or, you know, have you been able to pass the pricing along? I mean, or is there no impact actually in all of this
in terms of the current climate? So, you know, it's affected us in a few different ways. It's really tricky to source, you know, certain materials like, glass or bottles is really tricky right now. The supply just isn't there.
Okay.
Whether it's sitting in boats off the coast or whether where it's being manufactured, they just don't have the workers. I'm not sure what is contributing to that. Maybe they're just, you know, realizing that they can sell less and charge more and
that's that. Yeah.
And that's one way to do business, I suppose. But, yeah, I mean, it's certainly added some pressure to what we're doing, but you know, I'm sure any small business owner would sort of have the same mentality of like, what are you going to do? Like,
you got to keep going.
It's completely out of my control. And so all we can do is sort of adapt and pivot and change things. So like, for instance, when COVID hit and, you know, pretty much everything shut down, we were allowed to remain in operation because we were considered an essential business.
Thank God, right?
Yeah, I mean, everyone, wants alcohol, I suppose, when things go bad. But
It's like when riots in the streets if they're not.
It's like when things are good, let's go drinking. When things are bad, man, I need a drink. It's like
absolutely.
But so I mean, that was one of the first questions I asked. Actually, was like the local ABC store. I was like, "You guys are staying open during all this, right?" Like,
I mean, everything was a little bit different. Like they weren't letting people in liquor stores in North Carolina. You could essentially walk to the door and tell them what you want, and they'd go get it. But we did some pivoting. I was actually in the process of participating in a local scale up program through Mountain Bizworks here in the area. The first one met like as the news was breaking that COVID was a thing. And then the second one went remote, and then we were remote for the next 6 months. But it was actually a really valuable resource because it helped me sort of brainstorm and think about how we could pivot. And so there was, an emergency authorization for distillers to produce hand sanitizer. And, as
you broke off into some of that.
As lucrative potentially as that might have been, we did make hand sanitizer, but we did not sell a drop of it. We gave it all away.
Oh, that's awesome.
It just, I didn't
helping the cause.
I mean, my sister works in a hospital up in New York City. And so, I was getting firsthand accounts of, sort of the realities of what was going on the ground. And,
amazing.
God
bless your sister, by the way.
Yeah. And all the nurses, doctors, teachers, everybody out there that's dealing with all of this. But, so it just made sense because we're grain to glass. Most of the distilleries that were making hand sanitizer were buying grain neutral spirits. You can get a gallon of grain neutral spirits. You used to be able to get it for about $6 a gallon. It's gone up to about $9 a gallon. And that's 180 proof, 90% alcohol.
Grain alcohol.
Yeah. It's just like pretty much as hot. You can only ever go to, I believe it's either 96.4 or 94.6 percent alcohol before the alcohol starts just readily evaporating. Anyways, I digress a little bit, but it dawned on. So I took about the initial sanitizer thing was about 80 gallons of what would have otherwise been single malt whiskey. That we turned into hand sanitizer, probably the most expensive hand sanitizer that's ever been made
on planet Earth. Yeah.
Gave it all away. But I quickly realized that was not sustainable. We couldn't do that. And so, our malt house, Riverbend Malt House, was, super nice. They donated some grain for free for us to run through our systems and to turn it into hand sanitizer. So we did a round of that. But even that, it was like, I mean, the effort that was going into make it was still a crazy expensive process for us. And so where we ultimately landed, it ended up being a multiple month long partnership with New Belgium Brewing. Actually, they had an obscene, and like, I can't even remember what it is, but it was,
we like obscene.
I want to say it was like tens of thousands of gallons, if not like 100,000 gallons of beer. That it was a seasonal beer that they couldn't sell, or didn't want to sell, or, just didn't work for them. And so for about 3 months, a couple times a week, we were going over to Belgium.
That's money for you, right? I mean,
we were picking up this beer. We were bringing it back here. We were distilling it into hand sanitizer and giving it to restaurants. And, we had police stations.
Penny saved is a penny earned. I mean, that helped actually, streamline it and make it affordable to do.
Absolutely. And
nice shout out to New Belgium. Huh?
Yeah, for sure. Cool. And more than anything to me, it allowed us to continue to give it away, and for me to not stress as much about the
hands get a little sweaty as that stuff's going on. It's like, oh my gosh, that could all be profit. What are we doing here? No, that's good. It's great how things work out that way.
Yeah. And also during the pandemic, I mean, it caused me to think about how to shift my business model. Originally, I went into it being like, the model is to get on every bar and every menu and, get our name out there. And with everything shut down, with all the bars and restaurants shut down, it really made me reevaluate the natural asset that we have here at the distillery. We can bring people in, we can give them tours, they can do tastings
Absolutely.
here. We have more of a captive audience here. And so it really also had me pivoting from sort of that, like, all right, we got to be all over the state all the time trying to sell our product, to, hey, let's just bring people
Come to
here.
us.
Let the product sell itself,
come
right?
to us.
Come on.
And it's worked out for us. I mean, we grew, our revenue grew from 2019 to 2020. And then we've grown again this year, from 2020. So,
that's what it's all about, right? I mean,
yeah.
So, you've grown. It doesn't sound like with your process that pricing has been that much of an issue. Maybe if you were kind of buying in that grain alcohol, so to speak, or that alcohol, maybe it would affect things. But so now as you're growing and you're starting to focus on this new vision, I mean, what does the future hold for you and Oak and Grist?
That's a great question. I'm open to any answers that you guys might have.
Well, as far as expansion and growth, how are you doing it? Raising money? I mean, we talked a little bit before camera about crowdfunding and these types of things. Our audience out there, thanks again for watching. Might want to know, hey, how do I raise money for something like this? You find a mentor, but then from there, I'd imagine you can only go to the well so many times. So
yeah, and it's an interesting thing because, we didn't have there's three core founders and then my mentor. My mentor actually, when I offered him a piece of the company, he was like, I don't want anything. I'm old. What am I going to do? What am I going to do with it?
Right.
So,
right.
But his son is a partner. It's actually sort of a father-son team. So it's my father, myself, Edwin, and then his son, Russell. And we were able to bring, around $150,000 to the table between the three of us. And then we initially did I may be wrong on the number in the letter, but I'm fairly certain it was a 506B offering. Essentially what they would call a friends and family offering. So you're a little bit exempt from some of the more restrictive things that the SEC requires when you're doing fundraising. We did 2 rounds of that. Our initial round, together with the founders, I believe we raised about $500,000.
Oh, that's great. Good.
And then in the second round, we raised another, 2. And then, the crazy thing about a distillery is, we talked about that lag time between production and when it's ready. I mean,
absolutely.
But it doesn't mean that, we're still constantly, we brew 3 days a week and we distill those brews every week. And so we're constantly in production. So we're constantly putting money in at the beginning of the distillery and only really have begun to get a trickle out of it. So it's a really bizarre business model where it's like you invest this money and then you got to wait 3 years before you see a return from it.
J-curve. Yeah. You'll see that pop up. I'm hearing a nice concoction of patience, money, and the right people. And you're stirring that all together and hoping that works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe one thing that I'm curious about with this, I don't know if you call this COVID or post-COVID where we are right now, but your help here, obviously you're not the only one working. We met some awesome people up front. How has labor participation been for you and just keeping people here and working? I feel incredibly fortunate. I don't know whether, again, it gets to my stubbornness or what, but every single person that I've hired, we have retained up to this point. I kept everybody work. We had to dial back on some hours early on in the pandemic just because I panicked. But I brought everybody back full time pretty quickly. And have been able to keep things rolling. When it has, we've actually added a couple hires over the course of the last year and a half. It was relatively painless. We put it out there and we're able to, within a couple weeks have the perfect candidate and get them in here. So I feel fortunate. We're not feeling the pinch like the restaurants and the bars are feeling. Uber and Lyft doesn't even exist really in Asheville anymore because, nobody wants to do it. But, here at the distillery, we, knock on wood, we're
chugging right along.
Shoot, man, you're going to have to get your own fun bus or something and just go down to downtown and pick them on up, bring them up here.
Exactly.
Party at Oak and Grist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need a driver or two?
Yeah, maybe.
Somebody just kind of hype them up. I'll be the hype guy. I'll sit back there. You give me some more of this stuff here and some single malt. I'm ready to roll.
I'll drive the bus.
Yeah, I'm not driving. So listen, man, we told you it would be about 30 minutes. We're already kind of pushing that. We're going to go 10 more minutes with you.
Yeah, no problem.
One of the things we really like to do, right? So everybody can see that this is just really an awesome experience. I mean, my mind wants to go to so many places like competition and those type, with you being the only distillery around.
Well, not the only, but the only grain to glass.
Yes, grain to glass. Very well, good. Thank you. But it's just a very unique story. But that said, we do want to learn a little bit more about you, William, and kind of what makes you tick and kind of the story behind you. So for about 10 more minutes, can you join us for 10 more? Yeah. No, I mean, I'm good. I know we might not have touched on some things that you guys wanted to touch on. So if there's a few other things you want to throw in there, feel free. Okay.
Cool. I believe in my staff and I think they can handle it.
All right. Awesome. And you guys can see, I mean, we're literally in the middle of their production room. So as you hear stuff rattling and those types of things, I hope you look us up on YouTube and kind of take a look at the operation. But with that, I think Sam just pulled something out of the fishbowl, and that's what we're about to start.
Yeah. It's really cool. It almost feels like an aquarium's going on over here. I hear the water pumping in.
So that's actually what you're listening to right now is an active fermentation. So that's CO2 blowing off the top of the fermenter.
He does that all the time.
So that is literally the sound of alcohol being made.
Huh.
There we go.
Sounds like an aquarium.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
Who knew?
So let me give a quick shout out to another town we can see and track our listeners and where they're from. And so we'll keep this one at least stateside. Shout out to Paradise, Nevada. We might be in Paradise in North Carolina here, but Paradise, Nevada. Thank you for the listens and the support of USA Booming. So
thank you so much, Paradise.
Here's our first question for you, William. What song would make the best theme music for you?
Oh my goodness.
So you're walking into the room and
the walk up music. What is it?
I don't know. I mean, when I'm in here by myself, it's a lot of times it's hip hop.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
You do not look like the hip hop dude.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I like that bass. But I don't know. I mean, I guess you'd have to go with something like Tennessee whiskey or something like that and
awesome.
Keep it on brand.
There you go. That's right. You got to hold that brand content and what have you. So we're going to switch it up a little bit as the fishbowl does. So, look, you kind of have your own little super power of being able to turn something into something else. I mean, it's
water into wine,
right? Almost, right? I mean, in some weird way, right? But if you were a superhero and you had a superpower, I mean, what superpower or superhero would you want to actually be?
I've actually asked this question a lot of times. I used to ask people if you could be invisible or you could fly, what would you choose? I'm actually very much an introvert.
Okay.
And so invisibility, I think has always been top of my list to be able to just, I'm notorious for French exiting a party and just getting out of there without saying bye. And, so that might be
William go?
That might be up there.
Okay. Invisibility.
So I don't know who out there superhero wise has invisibility.
The Invisible Man, right? Isn't that like a horror movie or something? Wasn't he
that was, I don't know.
Anyway, there's a couple of them out there. I certainly wouldn't be on the villain side of things or doing anything strange. It would just be able to be like, sort of disappear into the background. And, but outside of that, I think, I don't know. I wear glasses. I've always thought just having like a hawk-like vision, being able to just spot things from super far away would be pretty cool.
Yeah,
that is
awesome.
Nothing. I've always been averse to flying. So,
Oh, really?
Not scared of flying, but it's just sort of like, put me in a big metal box and throw me through the air. I don't know.
My feet feel pretty good on the ground.
Yeah.
These mountains are solid up here.
Yeah, exactly. You climb a mountain, it gets you high enough.
That's right. That's right. So speaking of the mountains, maybe I just answered the question here, but tell us about your happy place. Do you have a happy place you go to?
Oh, definitely the woods. I'm not necessarily a religious person, but I've always considered the woods my church.
Cool. Cool.
I'm a mountain biker. And so just getting out in the woods and,
Absolutely.
being there and disconnecting from the chaos that is every day.
It's good. You already know that about yourself. We've done things in our day job where it's more like you take a personality test, and being out in the woods was something that the person suggested I do. I was
For
like,
both of us.
I was like, well, damn, actually I do like putting down the windows and open up the sunroof and I feel better going on. It's amazing what the mountains do. And I mean, on a day like this, 71 degrees, 73 degrees, gorgeous, beautiful out here. I mean, does it get any better?
Yeah, I mean,
December 3rd, I'm not sure.
You're stealing days in December when it's like this.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So we'll hit a couple more of these up here. I am just going to go ahead and grab this and we will see what the fishbowl gave me. And it's a short one. Look at that. So William, we talked a little bit about this. What is your nickname, or do you have one?
Let's see. I mean, I don't have a ton of nicknames.
Will Dog. Nobody's like Will Dog.
No, I mean, my former bosses at the creamery would call me Willie G.
Willie G.
I like that.
Growing up, there was always like the goalie from, Mighty Ducks was so it's always Goldberg or, the wrestler Bill Goldberg. And, and I think more when I was a kid, it was all my sister's friends, that had the weird, nicknames for Squirt and, whatever. So,
I'll stick with Willie G.
Yeah, there we go.
I like Willie G.
I do too.
Not to be confused with Kenny G.
No, certainly not.
Not at all. Not at all. No. Very distinct difference.
All right, we'll give you one more.
Although I did play the clarinet growing up, so
awesome.
I guess there is a connection.
Well, you know
there.
what? Put the hair down a little bit, man. I don't know. Little Kenny G's coming out.
That's great. All right, we'll give you one more and let you get on your way. What is the wackiest thing you ever did to help a friend?
Oh my goodness. Wackiest.
Well, it doesn't necessarily, but just any kind of crazy story with a friend helping them out.
Man, I don't know. I feel like I would need some time to think about this. I'll see if I can come up with. I'll see if I can come up with something.
You
really
see,
like a
ladies
very
and
helpful
gentlemen, we get them out there. They can talk about their fermentation process. Get them talking about goat cheese, and man, I mean, you can't shut them up. But
got 'em.
No, and I tell you what, I mean, you gave us a great story about how you did try to help an entire community. I mean, so we'll let you off the hook with that one.
Your entire what is it? Are we still Buncombe County over here?
Oh yeah,
yeah. The entire county of Buncombe got help from their friend getting free sanitizer. So that's pretty wacky.
Yeah, I mean,
you stop making money to help them. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I try to be a good friend. It's hard being an entrepreneur and being a good friend, but because there's so much that pulls you away. But I'd do anything for anybody. So that's why the wacky caught me off guard. I'm just like, it's all kind of normal to me because whatever
friend, wacky.
Yeah. Whatever a friend needs, really.
There you go.
That's great.
Well, this is the last one then. And we'll see what this one goes. Cause we did talk a little bit about funding and those types of things and winning the lottery. So if you did go ahead, right. I saw here that the lottery's getting over 200 million. So if you won that lottery, 200 million, or what have you, what's one of the first thing you would do with it?
I give all of my employees raises.
Boom. That's why you've held them all. Benevolent.
Yeah, that would probably be number one.
That's really cool.
We're fortunate. We've sold equity in the company, but we haven't really taken on any debt. But I would also probably take a large portion of that and, put it into the company and pump up the volume a little bit. That would be second.
Absolutely. Well, look, man, I mean, we're talking about helping people and struggle with the answer, but what's the first damn thing he wants to do when he wins $200 million?
Give money away.
I want to give it.
That's
which is great.
Yeah,
that was awesome. I mean, so humble.
Don't get me wrong. I'd certainly, go on vacation and
I would hope so.
Pay off my morgive and, all that kind of stuff.
And that was kind of a sweet voice I did. I didn't mean for it to be, but I mean, I thought that was just really awesome. I just want to give it away, give it to my employees. So,
well, 200 million is a lot of money. So.
Yeah, I mean,
you got $1 million. You got $1 million.
Yeah,
there you go. There you go.
I wouldn't be mad at that.
No.
It's that idea of you start a business in a garage and you go public, and all of a sudden secretaries become millionaires. Like, isn't that sort of what we all should strive for.
Absolutely.
Is to lift up the people that help lift us up.
There we go. That's awesome.
I really like William. You hiring?
Maybe in the spring.
There we go. We can always find some investors for you.
Yeah.
But well, I tell you what, man, we already went over a little bit of what I said, and you were graciously patient with some of our questions here, but really want to say thank you for coming on. I tell you what's the easiest way? Sometimes somebody might want to shoot you an email, get in touch with you, find out a little bit more about the process and what you've done. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, what's the easiest way to do it?
You can go on our website, oakandgrist.com, all spelled out. And there's a form there.
Fire away.
Give us a call, Instagram at Oak and Grist, Facebook, all the, well, no Twitter,
Yeah, haven't gone that far, right?
No Twitter, no TikTok. No, we're not.
I can't do it either.
No, it's too much to keep up with.
It is.
Or just get in the car and come to Black Mountain.
Yeah,
right?
1556 Grovestone Road, Black Mountain.
There we go. It's absolutely delicious. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for coming
Thanks
out.
for your time.
It was a pleasure.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for listening to USA Booming. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or leave us a rating and a review on your podcast platform of choice. Don't forget to check out the archives for other great conversations. Got questions? Email us at Sam or Ryan at usabooming.com or DM us on Instagram at USA_booming. That's it for now. We'll be back soon with another great talk with an entrepreneur you won't want to miss.